going on today. We're talking about DNA evidence and the importance here because now we were able to establish the physical evidence. We saw that there was evidence that was taken out of a dumpster at a Petco, and now trying to determine whose DNA was on that, as well as other items in the house, trying to understand whose DNA was on what, and we are taking a brief recess in that. But we're lucky because I want to talk a little bit about the mental aspect of this case. And to help me talk a little bit more about that, we're here with clinical forensic psychologist Dr. John Huber. Dr. Huber, great to have you back on the Law News Network.
Well, thank you for having me back on.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask our tech just if you could boost the audio in my ear for Dr. Huber. I could not hear. There we go. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Huber, I want to start with the basic premise here, okay? Whether it was Luis Toledo or not, how is it possible that someone could kill a wife or a woman of any nature and two children? What goes through someone's mind in general? And then we'll get into the specifics of this case.
Well, you basically have people who are full of rage, and they're reacting out of that rage. And they've been hurt, and the only way they feel like they can get back is through that rage. Or you have someone who is that psychopathic killer who may only, for example, some of them, they only can get sexually aroused when they kill. I don't think that's the situation, is from what I've been watching in this case with Toledo. But you have a psychopath, or you have someone who is not able to regulate and manage their anger. And, he has a special kind, to kill a child, a defenseless child, we can almost understand the rage when somebody's mad at somebody, heat of the moment. You've insulted me and you go after it. But to turn around then and kill two children, that's a extreme level of hatred. And, we don't have a way to measure evil, but as a father, it definitely feels that way.
We don't know exactly what happened to these three individuals. We're taking a guess. We're assuming that they were murdered. In a situation like this, where we have a second-degree charge against the Yesenia Suarez, and then a first degree for the two children, the first degree basically saying that he pre-planned this, he premeditated on it, he deliberated on it, and chose to kill them. What does that say to you about planning a murder of two children, as opposed to an instance where I can imagine someone's in a fit of rage and they go, they have a bit of craziness and they go and they kill two people that are in the room. If he's fighting with the wife, he kills her, and then in the instance kills the two children. But the idea to pre-plan or premeditate and deliberate on the killing of those two children, what do you make of that?
Well, obviously he was very much driven by his emotions. And, listening to the DNA testimony, it appears that they weren't his biological children. They were hers and a previous individual. So he didn't have a genetic connection to them. And it may have been that he was just trying to get rid of witnesses, make it so that it's more difficult to convict him, and hiding evidence, and assuming, again, like you said, that he's actually the one who has done this.
Right. Yeah. Assuming he is the one that did this, and I want to get into a little bit about the motive here. The idea here, the motive would be that they were in a relationship that was going down the downturn. She was pressuring him about his financial situation. Right. He wasn't contributing as much. And then the bombshell that she was cheating on him. I would like to go into the mindset, again, of Luis Toledo, a man who, if you take it by all accounts, he found out that his wife was cheating on him. They were in a relationship that was already in the downturn. What goes into someone's mind who just found out that their wife has been cheating on them, and they're already in a relationship where he feels he can't possibly support her financially, and she has two children? What is going into someone's mind? Not everybody who's in this situation, thankfully, does or is alleged to have done this, but what goes into someone's mind when all these things happen at once?
Well, I think part of what's happening here is you have this young man as an adult who's supposed to be able to be the provider and supposed to satisfy the needs of the family, and she's already on top of him because he's not financially able to do it, and then she takes another whack at him essentially, and you can't satisfy me, I have to go somewhere else for that too. So that may be taken from him as a direct assault on his manhood and who he is as an individual, not just within the family, but within the community.
Why is it when we hear instances of cheating, the first reaction that we have is anger? I mean, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know what the process is, but does it go from acceptance to sadness to anger? I'm not sure of the process, but everybody feels maybe all at the same time. But what is like the roadmap if you find out someone cheating? Because that is a really big bombshell, and it really hurts people on a personal basis.
Well, it's kind of like, the same kind of steps you go through. You started naming them. That you go through when you have a loss, whether it's a death, this relationship is gone, and you go through these different phases and you try to come to terms with them. And if you're unable to come to terms with them, you focus then on things that you feel like you can change. And if you want to blame an individual for everything, it's real easy to go after them and be physically assaultive to that individual. And, you do have that loss. You do have that anger, that instant shock. Oh my goodness, this has just happened. But to the other partner, they don't have it because it's been going on for a long time. So they're having a hard time understanding why you're so angry, other than the fact that, they cheated on you. But then you have to go through and process that. And everybody does that at their own rate, their own speed. And some steps are skipped altogether, till eventually you get to acceptance. And ask anybody who's had a recent or any kind of family loss of a grandparent or a parent. You want to strike out. You want to be angry. But when in that situation, there's nobody there really to be angry about unless some sort of accident or physical trauma took place. In this situation, when you have a partner who comes back and says, "Hey, we're done," you have somebody to go right at, and it's in your face.
Let's not forget, he showed up to her place of work, made a commotion, ran around accusing her of cheating, even confronted Kevin Dredden, who's the person that she was having the affair with. This is a guy, as you said, with anger who goes up and does this, and I think everybody reacts to it differently, but he reacted to it with an extreme amount of rage. I am curious, okay, let's break this down now.
Okay.
The idea that, you can speak about whether or not this was Mr. Toledo or cases in general where this evidence backs this up, people that try to clean up crimes, people that try to hide the evidence, they know they did wrongdoing and then they try to clear it up, they really think they're going to get away with it? And what goes into that mindset?
Well, part of the mindset is, you have those psychopathic tendencies. You automatically think you're smarter than everybody else, and you're smarter than the police, and you're going to be able to outsmart the judge. I've seen some amazing cases in the courtroom where people sit there, "Oh, that wasn't." We got videotape of them. They're actually wearing the same clothes they're testifying in, saying, "Oh, but that isn't me." Well, what about the clothes? "Oh, he's got a good sense of style there. It matches mine." And they have this overpowering belief that they're so much smarter than everybody else. And then you add on top of that this whole, we have those 2 or 3 generations that have been watching everything from CSI to NCIS, and you've been shown little pieces of how different people have been able to, in the past, successfully clean stuff up, without understanding that we've evolved through that. We learn to counter those types of interventions, and that usually doesn't get shown in most of the shows. So they think they have this education from watching TV.
It's interesting. Even people that commit these crimes, what we hear from testimony, if you listen to the testimony in this case, after a crime's committed, there's like little tidbits of things that they give away. There's an anxiousness. There's little lines that they say. I mean, we heard testimony yesterday where someone said that Toledo said, I snapped. And, I'm curious, when someone commits such a grave crime, and especially if they haven't done anything like this before, is it natural tendencies that they need to tell someone, or they need to get it off their chest, or they are going to slip up and say something?
Well, I think there's part of them, especially if they're that part we were just talking about, where they have this grandiosity, I'm smarter than everybody else. There's part of them that needs the recognition. They have to go out and say, "Look, I'm the one who fixed all this. I did this." and nobody will be able to solve it. Of course, usually that leads to them getting caught if we haven't done it in other ways. But there's also, we need a vent. To when you have this trauma, even, it kind of shows me that he's probably not a true full-blown sociopath, in the fact that, he wasn't reveling in his task internally. He had to go out and kind of get it off his chest, and unfortunately, not everybody can contain that. And unfortunately for them, as perpetrators of crime, and it'd be kind of nice if everybody had their priest to go and confess to, but that's not the way it works. It usually ends up in a bar or at work, or, somebody's just kind of having a breakdown and they let it all out. So,
yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people who commit crimes, they don't realize that later on what they say, what they do can be used against them in a court of law. That could be used against them, that they can, you see this testimony. I'm curious in this case, again, I'm making a presumption here. I'm presuming, if you want to take the presumption as true, that Luis Toledo did in fact commit this crime, there are family members, there are neighbors, there are people that are familiar with Jasenia and her two children. Do they take blame? Do they blame themselves that they could have done more? I know that there was accounts from her family that they didn't like Luis Toledo, that they maybe felt that they could have intervened. Look at the person that she was having the affair with. I don't know what she spoke to him about,
Right.
Luis Toledo, but maybe if he knew that this was a guy that maybe I shouldn't get involved with this. Do they take blame in these kinds of cases, the family or the friends?
It's so hard to know, because I haven't done an evaluation of Lewis, so I can't tell you if he wears everything out on his sleeve. But we've all had friends who always present like everything's going great in the relationship when, it's not. It's falling apart, and the other person in the relationship is on the side going, "Oh my God, this is falling apart." And as a friend, how do you deal with that? I mean, do you go out and say, "Hey, buddy, I hear things are on the rocks," and it creates some very difficult social interactions, especially if the couple is married or assumed married. How would you know more about my relationship and I'm in it? And so that creates a lot of issues too. So those telltale signs, although they make really great movies and things like that, most people really aren't that adept. I mean, ask anybody who's married and their spouse is giving them hints to what they want for their birthday, and we're very bad at picking up on those.
Well, hopefully, I think you might be speaking for a lot more people on that one. But I am curious. So one other thing is that this case, if he is found guilty of killing these two children, he could face the death penalty. That's a separate trial. There's a separate issue. But
Yeah.
jury, I would like to know your opinion about people that are in the position to find someone eligible for the death penalty. If they choose that he should be sentenced to death, that is not an easy thing for people to do. Everyday common people, jurors. What goes into the mindset of making that determination of, you know what, I'm looking at all the evidence and I believe that this person should be sentenced to death? How does someone make that determination?
Well, and man, that's a very difficult process to go through, because you have to say, first of all, okay, this person's bad enough that we have to protect them from society, so we put them into jail and keep them segregated from the rest of us. But to say we need to execute that person, you're saying they're not only bad for them, but they're bad for the people in the jail community, the jail population. And if you can reach that kind of threshold, I think it's relatively easy for people to say, yeah, we're better off without them present. At the same time, you're going to get a lot of explanation. Most states require a multiple number of appeals on death sentence before they can ever move forward with the execution. State of Texas, I believe it's 7 appeals you have to go through. So the majority of people on death row will die of old age before they actually get executed. I think less than 1% of the people on death row actually get executed by the state. So you start adding that type of stuff in there and you educate the juries a little bit about it. And I think it gives them kind of an out, so it's a little easier for them to move forward with that death sentence.
It's a determination that we don't know yet. They have to first determine if he's guilty or innocent, and then determine what happens with the death penalty, and we're going to have to hear about that. I do have one more question for you, Dr. Huber. The violent nature of this alleged crime, I mean, we know that she disappeared along with the 2 children. I asked this question last week about, we were covering the Jessica Chambers case, and about, you know, a boyfriend or somebody that's connected with somebody to such violence to get somebody they had a relationship with. Why do we see such violence between family members? I mean, here, this is his wife, if you want to take it for what it is, and her 2 children, which I know they weren't his children, but in the same point, he was taking care of them, surrogate father. How could someone commit violence? Why do we see these cases of violence between family members in such a personal nature as opposed to strangers a lot of the times?
Well, you know, it used to be before 1970, something like 90 or 95% of homicides were caused by a spouse or significant other. So they always looked at the partner. And part of the reason why that is, first of all, you're very intimate with that person, more so than anybody else. So you know their weaknesses. You know how to target them. So that gives you an upper hand should you choose to move forward with violence. And you can work on their weaknesses. Unfortunately for the victim, that you know, is bad for them. It makes it less likely that they'll be aware that it's coming, and, you know, they're going for their weaknesses, of course. So that's one thing. The other thing is you do have that sense of, you know, you're mine, I'm yours. So if anybody has the right to straighten you out, it's me kind of mentality. And you compound that with all of a sudden that rage and that violence, and it's, I'm going to fix you and I'm doing this. Some people, I've heard it 100 times, I'm doing this because I love you. That's why I need to fix this problem. And the problem is you probably need to leave the relationship as opposed to trying to force a square peg through a round hole.
So it's almost as if I know you better than anybody else, and it's a sense of betrayal. I've told you the most intimate details about myself. You've told me the most intimate details about yourself. There's no one else on this planet who knows me or knows you as well as each other. So it's that kind of aspect, right? It's I'm the only one that can do this, or has the right to.
You know, and it's funny because if somebody were to insult their spouse, they'd probably be the first person in that person's face. But when it comes time to, hey, you know, you've harmed me, well, I'm all over you, and it's okay, you know.
Insane. It's crazy that we see this too much. Anyway, Dr. John Huber, thank you so much for your analysis here on the Law News Network about this case. And as soon as we have more updates in this case as well as other cases, we'd love to have you on to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to be having our feed back in the Luis Toledo case any moment now, just to give you a recap about what's happening here today. We're seeing some testimony from a DNA analyst.